Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Craig Ashley. I'm a product manager on the Windows team. And I'm going to go through a variety of new things in Windows in a couple different areas today. There'll be just a little bit of overlap between the session I have tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, which is setting up Microsoft Education, so cloud first deployment, simplified deployment. There'll be a little bit of overlap between those two, but some of those things that we'll talk about today we'll demo tomorrow in that session as well. Wanted to spend just a second and tell you a little bit about why I'm passionate about education. I kind of goof in my biography that I spent a few years herding cats as a 5th grade teacher. And I was a teacher for 5 years in the New Jersey public school system. And my very first year of teaching, this really kind of set me straight about what we needed to do as educators. And then I've carried through on the technology front to make technology easier in schools. And this is a story I had this was 2 girls. I'm going to change the names, going to change the genders too, and say it was 2 boys. But I had 2 boys, Ethan and Ryan. And these 2 students were fraternal twins. So the interesting thing with fraternal twins is, right, they're born same time, those types of things, they're twins. But a lot of times they're completely different. And these 2 couldn't have been more different. Ethan was physically strong and a really mentally astute student. Ryan, on the other hand, was not. So he was a much smaller child. Wouldn't have even thought that they were siblings, much less the same age. And from a learning perspective, didn't get that same level of achievement that his older brother did. And so at the time, I practiced this process called guided reading. And what guided reading does is it levels books for students. And so Ethan at the top end was probably reading on a high school level as a 5th grader. Ryan on the bottom end was probably reading around 1st or 2nd grade. And every single year of his education, he had read the same book with the class, a whole class novel, every single year. And he never got it. And so at the end of our first round of guided reading, we did a book that was instructionally appropriate for Ryan. And he came to me afterwards, and he said, you know, Mr. Ashley, it's like, I just have to share something with you. He said, this is the first time I've ever understood the book that I've read in class. And that really hit me from a differentiation and a leveling perspective, and I've carried that through. My goal with the technology and working with the different engineering teams, the focuses of the things we'll talk about today are to simplify getting technology and to help those types of things. So as we go towards the second half of the session today and we talk about learning tools in Edge and some of the cool stuff that's coming, it is focused on that piece, which is the better learning outcomes. And I know a lot of us in the room, we don't focus on that. We have to get the technology up and going for our users, for our teachers and our students. But that's really my goal, to get the simplification of getting Windows running in that classroom and then the features and sets that will help teachers to differentiate and lead to better learning outcomes on the back end. So that's kind of why I've tagged on to the education piece. I've been doing it about 3.5 years on the Windows team, and why I love doing these sessions and love working with the other teams across Windows and across engineering to get there. Bunch of stuff. We only do these now. When it was Tech Ed, we did it a couple times a year, one overseas and one here. With Ignite, we just do this a couple times a year. So it's been 12 months since we've been able to do a session like this and cover things. So we're going to cover a couple different areas here as we go through the course today. The red areas above are things that in Creators Update were new. The ones at the bottom, the blue ones, are things that are coming in Fall Creators Update that are either updates to the existing feature sets or it's some net new functionality. So this is the broad brush of what we'll go through today from a presentation perspective. Show some demos, show a variety of different things associated with each of those as well. First half of the session is innovations for deploying. So the first thing I'd like to start with is Intune for Education. As much as I am a Windows person, and I wear my Windows shirt proudly, I do think this was one of the biggest investments our company made in this deployment process, which was Intune for Education. We've been pushing for this for about 3.5 years, as long as I started. If you haven't used Intune for Education yet, I'm going to show a very quick demo of it today, more tomorrow. We have a booth downstairs. I'll show a slide in just a second here. We have one of the PMs from Intune for Education down there. We have PMs across a variety of areas. So if something piques your interest and you want to come down and speak with us, we do have a booth down there. It's kind of hard to find. It's next to the Windows Insider Preview booth off to the side, and everything that says education is hidden in the back. So you won't see it from the front, but it is back there. And we have people throughout the day over everything we'll talk about that'll be there to answer questions if you have them and want to chat about them. But the focus of this was to streamline the deployment of Windows devices. And in fact, we'll show tomorrow, you can get a set of devices up in an hour from the beginning, setting up Office through the rest of it. And that was done in partnership with some policies on the Windows client, some CSPs, some policies that we need to do to simplify that process and the out-of-box experience, and some stuff that Intune has done on their front end as well here. So let me switch gears and we'll go through a quick demo. And before I show that again, just to show as well, this is what I just mentioned. We've got program managers from each of these areas down there throughout the next 4 days in the expo booth if you want to come chat about something specifically. We'd love to hear both good things and also the rough edges that you guys are seeing across any of these areas. It's the right group of people down there to hear those. So as we talk about this streamlined process, we know that everybody's not perfectly going down this narrow road. We veer off one side or the other. We want to hear those and how can we help with those as we go through this journey together here. And then one last thing. The other thing, Intune, I'm pretty excited about that. The other thing I think we've really improved on is the documentation related to deploying in education specifically. 3 years ago, you would probably have not found anything on what was TechNet, now Docs at this point, about anything related to education. We would have just said, go use all of the IT Pro documentation that's out there. And it's good stuff, but sometimes we need to tweak it a little bit to be a little more education specific. So all of that that's out there on the IT Pro side for commercial and enterprise and SMB, that's all still good stuff, but we've done some additional things because there's features and functionality that we've brought forward. And you'll see that at the top level here. This is a whole bunch of different spots to go for documentation. There are deployment guides to start top to end. This is kind of the guide I'll start and go through tomorrow in the session. We have features like the Setup School PC app documented on here, both from what it does, how do you do it, and the technical pieces behind it as well. And one other example of that is this take a test. How do you set it up? The variety of ways to do it. All the documentation behind it, the APIs, all of the stuff related to the edu-specific features are now up there. So this is kind of the other area that I've been a little bit excited about, that we've done a better job of getting documentation up there. And of course, we'd like to hear what are we doing right or wrong on that one as well. So let's switch gears, and I'll just show you very briefly that improvement in Intune for education. We have all these demos downstairs too, but the real focus behind this was to simplify the management and put only the things that we would need for a simple Windows deployment there. And the express configuration, that box on the left, is really what that looks like. If I click on that, it'll pop up here, and it'll give me a very quick walkthrough. So if I have just a set of devices or a classroom, for example, that I want to set up, let's say 24 devices that I bought from Best Buy, CDW, any place that I've got those. Coming off the shelf with Pro or 10S, any OS 10S or Pro or higher that's on that device, this will all work for. And it walks through just a quick few things. And I'll just step through the express configuration here. Simply click Get Started. There's another process, School Data Sync, we'll talk more about tomorrow. And we have showing downstairs too. That's how we got the data into Intune. So this is how I have schools set up on this page and other things set up on this page as well, is I've already taken that step of putting the data in there. But I would simply select the group. Maybe it's Mr. Ashley's 5th grade class that I'm trying to set up. And then I'd step through and add some policies here. The first thing is apps. I can add web apps to the device that gets pushed out. I can get apps from the Microsoft Store for Education, which is the Windows Store, and push those out to users as well. I can also, on this top one, this is something that's new and about the past month, that top one is Office. This helps us to deploy Office, click to run to devices, or if it's a 10S device, this is going to deploy what's called Centennial Office. It's Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and OneNote in a Windows Store app. So this is a package of those apps that's sitting in the Windows Store, full Office functionality built to run on Windows 10S. And I'll show that a little bit later there. So I could simply go through here, and I'd click a few of these that I wanted to go through. Click Next. And then I have some very basic settings here. There's about 150 settings in here right now. And in the basic setup, it's a subset of those. There's another workflow to go through and target directly and do a whole bunch of other ones. But this is just a quick setup piece. An example, there's the camera app. Not configure or blocked. So block turns on the policy to block that camera app. And unconfigured or not configured just means it's not configured. Now, that's sometimes a little bit confusing. We think it's on or off. It's not. Block is to override and block it. And not configured just means it'll accept the policy that is already set on that device. So if you have a GPO or some other policy already in place to turn off the camera, this will not turn it back on. So it's just important. That's an interesting discussion we're continuing to have with the Intune team about what's the right way to deploy all of these policies. And so as we go through, you'll see a variety of those. But you'd go through and you'd select the ones that you wanted for that group and then simply click Next here. We didn't make many changes, but this is the summary page, which just says you're going to add fluid math. So that school that I picked, that Mr. Ashley's 5th grade class, would get this app and those policies applied to those devices when the student logs into them. So really in about 5 minutes, once you have your group in there, you could go through and you could have your apps, web apps or store apps, policies set up for this classroom of devices and be ready to go on to that next step, which is getting those devices powered up and ready to go. So very, very quick run through on Intune for education there.
How did you get the devices in there?
So the question was, how did I get the devices in there? Yeah, so the devices I purchased, like 24 devices, those get populated based on the provisioning process that I'll show next. So the question was, how do I get the devices in there? The users, the groups, that type of data gets populated through SDS or Azure Active Directory, or another way if you want to do that. But the devices will come as part of the next process, which is going to be, in our cases, we're talking about Set Up School PCs app, which will register the devices in MDM and with AAD and getting those devices into Intune. Great question. So let's switch gears back here. That next piece, which is exactly what was just asked here, was the Set Up School PCs piece. This was something that was created to, once you have that MDM and those policies in place, this was created to streamline the deployment process. This was first created in the anniversary update, a couple updates ago, but was somewhat limited. And as we've moved forward through Creators Update and Fall Creators Update, we've continued to add things to this. There's another tool out there, the Windows Configuration Designer. It has an advanced workflow. There's a lot of policies and things to manage there. Those aren't all in this app because the goal is to try to simplify it. So it's always this pro and con. Do we put this in or do we leave it in WCD? So as we get feature requests, that's exactly what we're doing. We're saying, does it belong here? Or does it belong in the WCD and the package should be imported into there? But the goal of this is to do a few things. It's to put some basic policies on devices when you open them at that very first out-of-box experience. That very first page when you open a brand new Windows device, Cortana is there now, being loud, and we're hearing her. That's the very first stage. When you apply the provisioning package, the magic takes over and goes through this process here. One last thing on that. The reason it was created initially in Anniversary Update was to help with shared PC devices. If you have a cart of devices that you have a lot of students that you want to roll through and use those devices, that's why it was created to begin with. The policies that applied were great for that experience. So if period 1 had one student going through it, period 2 had another one logging into the same device, and so on. Because what these policies do over time is they manage kind of like accounting in a first in, first out type of mentality. So if you have a 464 low-cost Windows device and user profiles start building up on there and performance is impacted, those first users get removed. So it keeps Windows running well over time, as well as doing those policies that are good for shared users, not a single user on that device. Now what we'll show over time is that we love a lot of the things that you're doing, but use that same workflow for single user devices. So I'm going to give this out on a one-in-one environment. And so that's what you'll see some of the improvements this time around with the Fall Creators Update they are improvements to help that. To use the same policies, simplify that workflow, but to have that device set up for a single user and allow storage or allow saving to that device as students might do in that scenario. So let me switch gears and show you the the Setup School PC app. This one has a couple improvements above and beyond what's in the Windows Store. So when you go out there to the Windows Store now and you download this app, a couple of things I'll chat about aren't in there yet and will be in the next month as Fall Creators Update comes out. But you'll see it's a pretty straightforward workflow here. I simply click Get Started. This sign-in page, I'm going to log in. I'm going to log in with the same credentials that I would use to log into Intune, my administrative account, or I would use to log into Azure Active Directory. And the reason we do that is because when I apply this USB or this provisioning package to my new device, it is going to join that device to Azure Active Directory, and it's going to join Intune. So that's why we're logging into the account now. This is creating a bulk join token as part of this, that when Windows sees that in the out-of-box experience, it's going to say this provisioning package has the right to join to Azure Active Directory and to go. And so that's why we log into the device here. And you'll see it has me up there. That is my account. Simply click Next. The suggestion is to be on your Wi-Fi network at your school when you're creating this. It simply finds it, and then you can add that to the provisioning package. There is a way to add a Wi-Fi network separately, but we just suggest that is the right way. I'm going to skip that right now. You'll get the warning that says you need network to complete this process. So to complete the MDM join and ADN and Azure Active Directory enrollment, you do need to have network connection to reach out for that piece to happen. And so if you're not going to be Wi-Fi connected, it's letting you know do Ethernet here. So I just say got it. This is where you could name this, and it's only 5 letters, and then it adds an appendix onto the back. This is what the device is going to show up as. This was the question, how do the devices get in there? If I'm using Setup School PCs, this is going to create that group of devices with the appendix onto the back. So if I wanted this to be something like Ashley's class or something like that, that is where I would put this in there, and then this is how the groups are going to show up later in Intune from a management perspective. This is the very few policy configurations that we can make with this. The rest of them are automatically happening behind the scenes here. But there's a few of them to note. Remove apps that are pre-installed. As we'll talk through this process, our goal is to help you move away from having to image devices. Now, if you're using Windows 10 Education or Windows 10 Enterprise, today you pretty much have to image a device or do an in-place upgrade, right, to get from Pro or Home to Education. And so our goal is as we move forward, we're going to continue to make that process simpler and simpler. One of the things that's there to do that is that first one, which is to remove the app. So if there are some things on that device, if you did buy it from a big box retailer and it came with preloads from the OEM, this is going to remove those. So one reason, obviously, that we want to image is because we want a clean image to have on there, and this is going to do that. The other couple on here, as I mentioned, allow local storage and optimize a device for a single student. So if these are one-to-one devices, my boys, my older two, 7th and junior in high school, all have one-to-one devices from the Lake Washington School District. They could use this, and it would allow them to save locally, and it would change a few of the policies to let the user modify a couple things on that device that we don't allow on shared PCs. One on there, let guests sign in. This creates a guest account on the device. This was a request for younger grades, K1, 2. If you don't want those age of students to log into a device, creates a guest account that can be logged in without a password. And it'll use the apps and the pieces that are on that device for the user. And the last one on here, we'll show this tomorrow in a little more fashion with one of the devices that we'll set up, is enable Windows 10 automatic redeployment. It's a mouthful. We do that with names, do mouthfuls with names. But what this is a process to do, and I'll talk about it a little bit more, is at the end of the year, we want to reset. And this is going to do a bunch of things if I select this policy to make that end of year reset much easier for you guys, instead of re-image and replace. And we'll talk more specifically about what that means in a minute here. But if I clicked those and went through, take a test, this would set up a take a test account on a device. We'll talk a little bit more about take a test, but it's high stakes assessment. Right now, take a test works with SBAC or AIR. So it's one of the big standardized assessment companies here in the United States. You would simply do that. You would put in the URL, that they would give you. And there's an account similar to that guest account on the sign-in screen I mentioned earlier. When a student clicks on that, it opens up Edge in a lockdown fashion, pointing to that URL, and that's how they would take that test. And this is just an easier way to set that up here. So I'm going to say yes, but I'm not going to put the URL in right now. I was having some hard time getting to this on the network here, so I might, oh, it worked for us. There's some suggested apps here as well. I can click on these and they become part of the provisioning package. That first one is specifically for a Windows 10s device. If you want that desktop bridge, that store app version of Office on the devices, you can click on this and it gets installed onto the provisioning package. I mentioned you could push it through Intune for Education. That's coming over the network. This is a way to install it locally on that device. You'll pay the price up front, so it does take about, it depends on your network, 10 minutes or so, because you're downloading a 3.1 gigabyte package of Office from the store to put on this provisioning package. And then, of course, it takes longer to provision that because it gets installed on the device as well. But it keeps it off the network, so it keeps you from having to deploy that over the network here. I'm not going to select any of those. The last page is just to give a review package summary, let you know what you did and what's going to be on that provisioning package. And then you would simply insert the drive here. And that's kind of the extent of what we'll do in this one today. Tomorrow, we'll take that device, so we'll take the provisioning package and we'll run it all the way through. So we'll show how quickly that device gets set up with those policies. We'll show what that user experience looks like that's set up on there. And then we'll go to that point, if we have time, of at least kicking off automatic redeployment at the end to kind of show the life cycle of what a student device would look like over the course of the year. So I'll pause there. Any questions on set up school PCs? So if you wanted to create an image with the provisioning package in it, you could. The question was, could you deploy an image with Pixie Boot? You could. You could take this package afterwards. The kind of the workflow here that we'll show, this was kind of the out-of-the-box experience. You could take this provisioning package and not use it in the out-of-box experience, but include it in an image that you've created. And you could deploy that image over a Pixie network. The provisioning package itself, I'd need to check and see. I don't believe the provisioning package would be deployed over the network like that right now. There are some goals to help with things like that. But if you wanted to use that, the best way to be include it in the image or to use it through this USB plugin experience. Yes? Yes.
If your school's network is behind a captive portal, can you handle that, or is that something you have to set?
The suggestion would be, so the question was if your Wi-Fi is behind a captive portal, the suggestion would be to set up for this process, to set up a separate network, more like a guest network for these devices to connect to finish this process. I'd definitely be interested to chat afterwards or sometime during this week to hear a little bit more about what you're doing there and to see if there's like what else we could do or put you in contact with that team specifically too to chat through it. So this is that general process here then that we'll show live tomorrow. But if everything works well, you plug it in. You see in this out-of-box experience here a new page that will show up. And it is this page right there, that one. That shows you what you're doing as part of this process. In Creators Update, you started by putting the USB in, and then you got to the lock screen. And if the provisioning package failed, it failed. The nice thing in Fall Creators Update is that it's going to show you all of the things that you're doing, and it's going to end on that too. So if everything works well for you, it comes back to this page, and in the bottom left it says, great, your provisioning package worked. That could go wrong, right? Something could go wrong in that process. And so as part of this, with Fall Creators Update, you'll see this is an example of a provisioning package I was doing that went bad. Office wasn't installing, and so the provisioning package is going to fail. You see all of these setup completed with errors and some things down in the bottom. I can reset. I can download the error logs to see what happened. Or I could also create an admin account, a local admin account on that device to do some more troubleshooting to see if something's wrong. So this provisioning process helps with that. It simplifies that workflow. I haven't counted the number of screens in Ubi, if it's 13, 14, or 15 with all the clicks and the different things that there are in a consumer device. With this, it's plug in the USB. You don't even have to click it anymore. It recognizes it's a provisioning package. It just goes. And it goes until it gets to a point where it worked. And then you simply take that one in the bottom left there, and you would pack it away. And then that first day of school, you'd hand it out. And any student that's part of that AAD domain, any teacher, any student would log into that device. And of course, if there were problems, then we would troubleshoot it throughout the process here. A couple places in the presentation for that specific documentation, documenting everything related to set up school PCs. I think we had one more question here. Yeah, so the question was, is the provisioning package you're creating update specific? Through Creators Update, it was. So in Creators Update, you needed to use the version of the app that downloaded from the store for 1703, which was Creators Update. For Fall Creators Update, we've changed that. Fall Creators Update Setup School PC packages will work on Creators Update and Fall Creators Update. It still will not go back to the previous version of it, but it will work on 1703, and then if it's 1710 or 1711, the Fall Creators Update one that's coming out. And that will be our goal moving forward too, is that we'll continue to support that with the Setup School PC package. Yes. Yep. To this one. Oh, that one. Sorry. Yep. Yes. Question. Yeah. So the question was, how is this different from Intune for Education? They're complementary. And so Intune for Education sets up the policies on the devices. Some of the specific policies, there's about 150 of them that you could manage through there. You could push apps. You could do some other things through there. The goal of Setup School PCs is to set a few other policies to help with this process, and then to help with the provisioning process. So if you are using this process where you're starting at that very first out-of-box experience, you create the provisioning package, just what we showed, and when you get to that lock screen, the device is enrolled in Intune and has joined the Azure Active Directory. If you're using another process, an imaging process, or some other method of doing that, you would not need the Setup School PC app to do that. So it's purely to streamline the process of getting it into Intune for Education and Azure Active Directory. Right, so let's talk just a little bit more about the take a test piece. I'll spend less time talking about this one tomorrow, kind of the merits of it, and we'll show how this could work in the high stakes assessment piece. Take a Test was created about the same time as the Setup School PCs app a few updates ago. And what it does, I mentioned earlier, is it opens up into a locked down version of Microsoft Edge. And it's doing a variety of things that are necessary for locking down tests in schools. And I'd like to share just one other story from when I was teaching. We did this in 2002, 2003, 2004 in New Jersey, but it wasn't online. It was through a paper packet. And every morning my principal walked by and she counted out 25 packets to me. And I counted out 25 packets back. And then I signed on the dotted line, which said, I will return 25 packets to you. And I don't know if this ever happened, but the threat was if you return 24, you could lose your job, tenure or not, because the security of those tests or cheating on those tests was that important. And so when you move into the online world, you can think we have to do exactly those same things. And so Take a Test was created to simplify that process, working with some of the testing vendors, in this case right now, SBAC and AIR, to simply lock into their online assessment through Edge. As we showed earlier, you could do that through Setup School PCs. You could also set that up from Intune for Education. But the idea then is you don't have to load more software on that device. You don't have to load any additional Java updates, any of those other things that you may go through now on that version of the test. You'd simply put the URL in. The experience to the student is exactly the same way. The online piece logs in. My students, my older two, take these tests online. They don't use Take a Test at Lake Washington, but it's the same process. The same page comes up. You log in with the credentials that the student receives, and they take the test and then exit it when it's finished. And so I have just a couple click-throughs here of what that looks like on the device. There's two forms of this. So the first one is the high stakes piece. I have one other thing which I'm pretty excited about here because it works relatively well. SBAC and Error, SBAC's one of the big testers. Pearson and their app, TestNav, is another big one in other states. Most states don't use both. They pick one or the other. There's a Pearson TestNav app in the store now, and I'll show that quickly. Same thing here. Much easier to deploy this than a Win32 application. If you're using Intune for Edu, you simply download it from the store and you push it out to all of the devices. So it's a nice way for that app to be deployed, and I'll show it just briefly. But the experience works like this. When the students come to April, May, or June in the Northern Hemisphere here, they take this yearly standardized testing around third grade now. And there's just this account that's set up on here. This time we named it Andy Test. Would typically name it Take a Test. It would just click into it. And this is what the student would see. They'd see, hey, I have to put in my ID and the other information to take the test. And then it logs into that test. And Edge does the magic around that to keep it locked in so that the student can't pull up other apps. They can't take screenshots. In fact, this is a very hard one to demo because the app itself blocks display to secondary devices. So it has to be running for the most part in a VM on existing operating systems to show it in a good fashion. I mentioned that other one, which is Pearson TestNav. So for those of you who are saying, you know what, Take a Test won't help me, we're an SBAC, we're a Pearson or a park district, PRC. This is the app through TestNav that will do that. This is in the Windows Store today, so it's a free app up there. It can be pushed into your Microsoft Store for Education account, and it can be available for offline or online provisioning. You can target devices with it with Intune for Education to push it out there, and it just sits there. When the student opens it, boom, it opens up, and it locks into this test experience. So if you're one of those member states, the student would simply click on that, and it would pop up the login screen for that at this point, and then they would log into it. So it works just like their Win32 app. The beauty of this is it's easier to get on the devices. It also updates through the store. So when Pearson updates the app, it updates the app in the store, and the app updates down that way to the devices. So you don't have to worry about managing the update cycle of those Win32 apps. If you have high stakes testing providers that we haven't talked about here, there's a few other ones that we're working with right now. We'd love to have that conversation with them that says, would you like to take a test, or would you like to go through the desktop bridge process and get your app in the store? Either way is great. This one's pretty simple. This does not take that much time as long as their app works in that desktop bridge process. And then it simply gets uploaded to the store. We do have to work with them, however, because we have to note these apps as special testing apps. So we have to verify they are who they are. Not anybody could put an app in there that does the kind of lockdowns that this app would do. Second half of that is the kind of the low stakes or ongoing assessment piece. We brought this out with the creators update. Take a Test is just resident on devices from 1607 forward. That means it's a hidden app. It's headless. It's sitting in the background, and if you invoke it, it opens. Create a Take a Test link as a way for a teacher to go to a specific site, put in a URL, like a Microsoft Forms is kind of the example I'll go through, and then they could take that link and put it in a OneNote. When the student clicks on that, if it's a student assessment, the student would open it, and it would open up Microsoft Forms in Take a Test, and the student wouldn't be able to open the calculator app or go to another location. While they're taking that quiz, that form, they have to stay locked into that, and then they control out, delete out when they're done. So it's an interesting way to do that. They simply create the link here, export the link, put it in some place like a OneNote. I have it spelled out here because that's what in the previous update, we didn't give a nice way to create it. We just said, hey, put this lockdown information on the front or the back of the URL, and you'd be surprised nobody did that. But the Create a Test link, it's quite a few uses that automatically create the link and push that out. Then when the student opens it, this is just the form. It opens up like this and Take a Test, and they go through it and they're done. Most modern websites will go into some form of a lockdown mode like this. It will support it. We've done some work specifically with Forms that's in beta now, to where we've included it within Forms itself, where when the teacher creates the form, they can select if they want it to open with Take a Test or not at this point. So they wouldn't have to go through the process. The link that would be created with the Forms already does that. So a couple resources on those. We don't have resources up there specifically for assessments like getting Pearson in, although there are Desktop Bridge API documents up there talking about going through the process of doing desktop bridge on a device. But again, we'd like to have those discussions. So if there are vendors that are of interest, we'd love to push forward and to get those guys on one version or the other of the assessment platforms. Any questions about Take a Test before we hit Store for Education? Yes. It's a good question. The question was, do I know if there's a way to set up the app, specifically the Pearson Test Nav app that I showed, to go to the specific state? I don't know that. I have not used the Win32 app much. Do you know if the Win32 app has that customization that allows that? Okay. Okay. Yeah, so I don't know if that works with that. I would have to check and see. If you want to swing by, I can give you my card afterwards. And if you wouldn't mind sending me an email, I'm happy to follow up and see on that one. All right, so we'll wake this machine up as we're talking a little bit about the Microsoft Store here. So the Store for Education has been around for quite a while. Up until about 3 months ago, it was called the Windows Store for Business. Then it was Windows Store for Education. Now it's Microsoft Store for Education. But education's finally in the name, even though there was an educational experience. It's easier not to just have to justify afterwards why education's not there, to just simply have it in the name. But the thing here we'll show, and again, just very basic intro here, is that anything that's in the store can be in the Microsoft Store for Education. Any of the apps that are there, they can be pulled over into the Microsoft Store for Education, and then they can be pushed through that process with Intune for Education to specific users or devices here. So there are a lot of great apps in there for that. So we'll switch gears and show what the general kind of experience looks like here. When you log in, you see, again, Microsoft Store for Education. The educational portion of it is that as you look through the top categories on the left here, you'll see that they are education focused. If you create a Store for Business account that is not education verified, you'll see it's different. It's productivity and a bunch of different names. Our goal here is to surface the edu content that we feel is relevant or in education categories. But like the reverse is true. Even if it doesn't show up there, you can search for any of the apps. So that TestNav app that I mentioned, the Pearson one, I could search for it here, and then I could find any of those apps that were in the Windows Store, and it would pop up here slowly but surely. And so it would pop up here. And so I can search for any of the apps, but the goal here is to find those apps and to get those ready for users. So if I wanted to purchase this app, this one's a free one, I'd simply click on it here. And I already have it because I'd already purchased it, but I could do a couple things here. I could add it to my private store. And so my private store, I have up here, you see my name up here, Craig Ashley. This is the name of the store that shows up in the Windows Store client on student devices. So if I purchase 20 apps and put them in the private store, one way that students or teachers could get those is they'd open up the store client, they'd click on the Craig Ashley tab, and then they would have those 20 apps there and they could self-install. As an Education Edition or Enterprise Edition feature, you can block the rest of the store. Right now, that's not available on non-education or enterprise level editions to block that. What that means is on those editions, if you block the rest of the store, when a student opens up the client app, the Windows Store app, the only thing that shows up there is the private store and the apps that you selected for them. So they can't find anything else that's in that store or search for it. They can only install what is specifically there. So I could add it to the private store, or the last thing here is we could manage that app. So you could see who I've pushed the app to, or I've installed it to, or I could push it to groups, a whole variety of things from here, so that we could get it out to those devices. So a variety of things that we can do with that. That's the majority of what we'll say on the store. The last thing we did want to show here, let me click into just a couple other areas, because more information is coming into that Microsoft Store for Education portal that you may be interested in. It's syncing up a couple different things. For example, the subscriptions, these are trials, licenses, should look like what is in your Office 365 admin portal. And as we continue to roll forward, it should look like, if you're a volume licensing customer, what you have in volume licensing as well. The store team owns all of that infrastructure, and they're going to be including those types of things in here. So the Microsoft Store for Edu will be a nice place to come to see those things, as we continue to move forward here. And so there's a few other things that are in here as well. Last highlight here, manage benefits. There are a couple benefits that kind of that show up here. There's a Minecraft example of one here. Another one that would show up here, but this is, I have an education tenant, but it's not an education verified tenant at the I say the lowest, but the highest level here. With 10S that we'll talk about next, there is a switch from Windows 10S, if you have 10S devices, that are free for education customers via the Microsoft Store for Education. So if you are I'm not a paid customer of Microsoft. If you are, as an education customer and verified to that level, there's a way for you to go in there and click on that. And if you want to upgrade, I shouldn't say upgrade, if you want to switch devices from Windows 10S that you have deployed to Windows 10 Pro, it targets all of the AAD users there. So it does target all AAD users. And when they log in, it simply updates to Pro. And so that is a benefit. So we'll see more types of things coming through the store as well to manage your users. We're working on a targeted way to do that as we continue to move forward. What we mean by that is you could target a group of devices to switch from 10S to Pro versus the broad, all of your AAD environment. So that's a pretty quick run through on the store for Edu. Any questions? Pardon? Right now, no. The question was, can you switch back? Can you switch back from Pro to 10S right now in that same simple fashion? No. So the way that you would, if you did that switch to Pro, you would need to reinstall 10S. Right now, reinstalling 10S, and we're going kind of right into that, so thank you for that one. But reinstalling 10S would be to use that easy installer that's available right now. And so there's definitely qualifiers. I'll talk a little bit more about that. How do you reinstall Windows 10S on a device in just a moment here. Let me get a couple of the basics out of the way about 10S. And I have a device that's running it up here as well. 10S we announced quite a while ago at that May 2nd event, which was an education event in New York City. And there were a few reasons why we are talking about 10S, specifically in schools. And part of that is the security and the performance aspect of it. If you use setup School PCs on a 10S device, it works just like any other edition of device. But the benefit there is that there's a lot of Win32 baggage that comes on normal edition of Windows that don't run on a Windows 10S device. Group policy doesn't run on 10S. Traditional Win32 applications don't run on Windows 10S. A lot of executables, right? Executables, those types of things that bring viruses or bad things, or can bog down because they get around user rights that we put on devices that students and users can install, don't run on Windows 10S. So the nice thing is that it's more of a pristine operating system over time. That upgrade to Pro, or that switch to Pro that we talked about, allows you to switch devices if you need to. So if you happen to be a school that doesn't have a high-stakes testing provider that's using Take-A-Test or doesn't have an app in the store, you can switch those devices to get to Pro so you can install a Win32 application. Or if there's other applications or accessibility software. A lot of accessibility software needs to reach down and do specific things that Windows 10S doesn't allow. So those switches are there to allow for that. And in schools, as I mentioned, that's free. Right now, what that looks like is it does look like a reinstallation of Windows 10S on those devices. So if you do the upgrade to Pro or the switch to Pro, you would need to do that reinstallation. There is an installer up online, and I think I have a link to it here we'll point to in just a minute here. So let's, I'm going to switch gears over to this one. I have Windows 10S running on a Surface Pro here. And so the first thing I think that you're going to notice on this, if you haven't seen any of this before, this is the current version. If you had a Windows 10S device This is the current version of Insider Preview that would be on that. So it's 296. It's what went in the fast ring, I think just over the weekend. I think they announced it here. So this is just that version of it running on there. There's a few things that are pretty cool in this Edge and a couple other ones that I'll show. But the first thing we wanted to show with this was it is just Windows. So the user experience, the experience that we would expect students and teachers to understand, all that is there. If we're running that full version of Office on the device, right, that desktop bridge Office that's been loaded on there, it is just Office that's on there. And so it opens and runs just like Office, PowerPoint, Excel, and Word. So it all runs like that, OneNote. So the great things are on there in terms of the experience that we would want to utilize. Now, the one place that things are going to differ is, as I mentioned, you can't install Win32 applications, or there's other things that can't be installed from the internet. One of the biggest ones is, we'll open this one right here. You can download, but you can't open and install some of these. This is Adobe Reader. So this is the Win32 version if you go out to the Adobe site and you download this to run it. So the experience that's been built there is to help users who wouldn't know what's going on if they tried to open up or just said, you can't run this app on your machine. And so we have a team that's in the process of doing linking. So to look at some of the top apps and to link to apps that are in the store or app categories that are in the store. And so you'll see here this says, hey, you look like you were going to install Adobe Reader Touch, but Windows 10s doesn't allow this type of installation to happen. And so if I click on Get the App here, then what we'll see is as this pops up here, it should take me directly to that Adobe Reader Touch app, which in this case is the same thing. It's just sitting in the store, and it can be deployed on those devices. So any of those more traditional apps that you're trying to install as part of this would work in the same way. But it might pop up and say, there's categories here, or you know what, there's not a direct match for the app that you're looking to install here. So this is that difference in experience here. There are still definitely a variety of apps that don't run on devices, on 10s devices. There's a variety of programming apps, again, similar to some of the accessibility things, STEM apps, those types of things that don't. Arduino IDE is an interesting one that we worked specifically with them to do some work here. And this is just a circuit playground. But what you can do with this application is you can program this. And so teachers can do a variety of STEM capabilities in there from a programming app, which is this Arduino IDE that we have on here. What we need to do is we have to work with some of these providers to get different types of things necessary. Some of these traditional programming apps, what they do is they'll install on, or there'll be a store app and they'll install, but they need other things to come down, or they pull other pieces from different locations depending on what you're working on. And it's those types of executables or types of things that won't run on the devices. Drivers fall into that as well. So if you're going to brave the new world of installing using that easy installer of 10s on a test device, the things that you're going to notice are odd eccentricities like this. You're going to notice that maybe the precision touchpad doesn't work. So if you have a device that's running Windows 10 Pro right now and you have two-finger scroll, that might not work on the device that you're testing this on right now. Some types of ink capabilities, like with the Surface Pen, if there's specific functionalities that go above and beyond the specific drivers that are in Windows Update, like those are the things that won't work right now when you install on devices. The net new devices that are coming out, right, the new devices have those drivers, and we're working to get other drivers in the store and in Windows Update as well. So as more people use, more test, we find the right drivers and we work on that. But if you go to that page with that easy installer, it does go through a list of things that you should think about. Right now it's testing using that installer to learn more about 10s. Yeah. Question? OneDrive works, yep. Question was, what about OneDrive on 10s? That works just the same as on... Yeah, so the question was Windows RT. And so it is interesting because the first thing that pops up, and I didn't see who yeah, so the immediate thing that pops up is, you know, people who have used that before think of this, you know, like the same thing there with that. One of the main differences is I think some of the other things that are there with the apps in the store that are available, the drivers like the Arduino IDE that has the specific drivers within the app and the other inbox drivers that are there. And certainly, of course, one main difference is that if you need to switch, the switch is there too, right? So if you are running a Windows 10s device and you want to switch to Pro because it's not doing what you need it to do, that is there to move to that as well. So it's a fair question. It's in schools specifically. It's one of the big ones we do get when we hear about 10s. Yes.
What's the difference between Windows 10s and the checkbox that you can check on Pro Enterprise that will allow you to install apps?
Yeah. So there are some questions. The question was, there are policies that came through in the last update that allow you to specifically only allow store apps to be deployed on devices, and how is that different than Windows 10s? So there are some additional things that could get on devices that are executables, or a few other things with those policies. 10s does at heart basically apply that, right? There's that policy. Underlining, there's a variety of other lockdown mechanisms on that as well. There are some additional areas that those policies do allow things to be installed that wouldn't be blocked as part of that. And then there's some of the performance and the startup specific pieces in the boot process that are a little bit different as well, that help that performance piece with startup times, battery life, a few of those other areas as well. All right, so one quick thing on the devices here as we switch back to the correct slides here. One quick slide here. We have four different of the devices downstairs right now. If you just want to come see what a sub $299 Windows device looks and feels like, how it runs. 3 of them are running Windows 10s, and 3 are running Windows 10 Pro. So you can see with the apps on there what an experience on those devices is going to be like. We have some that are the 2-in-1s with the touch that are down there, so you can see how a $289 or a $299 device works with a full version of Windows, with ink devices and a variety of other things down there as well. And that's just a broad brush of the other devices that will become available as well. Now, come end of year, I alluded to this in the Setup School PCs piece. There's a policy in there that can be turned on. This is a Fall Creators Update capability called Windows 10 Automatic Redeployment. Right now, there's a variety of options to reset devices, including re-imaging devices, which is what we hear a lot of times happens at the end of a year. We spend the whole year just simply re-imaging devices. Reset My PC or PC Reset, that's been around since about the beginning of Windows 10. What we've done is we've taken the underpinnings of that, and we've chosen to preserve a bunch of other things that are already on that device that would simplify the process for getting to the next year, and that's what's noted on here. The Wi-Fi, it's going to preserve AAD join and MDM enrollment. It's going to keep the provisioning package, so if you use the Setup School PCs provisioning package or another one, it's going to keep that on the device as well. And then it's going to remove personal files and settings. So a lot of the reasons we want to reset a device at the end of the year, and then as it goes through that process, it simply gets back up to the lock screen, and then there's a little message that lets you know it happens. And so we'll show it live tomorrow, but Control-Win-R on the lock screen or the sign-in page is what pulls that up, and then an admin user, so in Azure, someone who's an admin in there, can kick that process off for that device at the end of the year, let it run through, and then just power it down and get it ready for the next year. So this is a pretty cool capability that it does still take a period of time. So it is still using the underpinnings of the Reset My PC. So depending on the speed of the device, the hard drive, those types of things, it still does take 10 to 20 minutes to finish the reset, but it preserves the things that are necessary there for the next school year, to really have a student or a teacher just come in on day one and log into the device. And then policies are pushed from Intune. So everything else that needs to come down again gets pushed down onto those devices once the user's logging into them on the first day. Yeah, so the question was, does it have to be AAD? It does need to be Azure Active Directory for this process right now. Yes. Yes. No, this is a so Fall Creators Update. It will need Fall Creators Update. It will be in anything that's Pro and above. So that's Pro. 10s, interesting name. It's Windows 10 Pro in S mode. So it has almost everything in there, but some of those things we talked about. So it works on that and above. The reason it doesn't work on home is because it requires AAD, join, and MDM as part of the process, and those aren't supported on a home edition. And I already showed this as part of the provisioning package, but you can turn it on with Setup School PCs. It will have a policy in Intune for Education. It's not there yet, but it will have a policy in Intune for Education that also allows you to turn that on. There are CSPs, so if you're using a third-party MDM provider, you could set it that way as well, or through WCD. So there's a variety of mechanisms to enable or allow automatic redeployment on devices. But right now it does need to be turned on. And if it's not, it won't come on with the device when you control WinR. Yes? That's a great question. Can you kick this off as a mass deployment? So could you use Intune for Education Today to push this out? No. Today you cannot. So this does require a device-by-device touch to have this process kick off. The number one, as we've talked through this process, the number one request is to allow me to manage the process as well. So don't be surprised if that will be coming, to kick it off with Intune for Education, not just turn it on or off. So the very last part of here of the presentation, we'll see how much we go through here, is kind of the innovations for using in the classroom here. And the first one is Microsoft Edge. And it's always interesting that we never have a browser discussion when we talk about Windows in general in schools. Other than we typically hear, like, this website doesn't work, or this doesn't work, or I have a compatibility issue with Edge. We absolutely want to know what's not working. Engineering very much wants to fix those issues. So if there are websites and they can be fixed to run with Edge, we absolutely want to hear about them. We can get your name down at the booth. We can scan it and follow up with a note on that if you have specific websites that do not work. We absolutely want to do that. We have an alias that we will be sharing that allows you to say, hey, this page doesn't work. Engineering goes out a lot and does go to main websites like PowerSchool and some of those things, for example. But there are some sites we can't get into in PowerSchool. So we don't have logins for some of these things. So we just need to know what's not working. My junior, they use PowerSchool at their school, and so he can log into PowerSchool. It works just fine. He can go down to a couple different things in there, but once he gets to this specific page, it doesn't render correctly. And so those are the types of things we want to make sure that work. And so our goal here is compatibility and performance. And then the rest of this is kind of as the idea of an edge built for learning. And so these are the things that really get me excited for the students in the classroom, which is learning tools and integration of some things that can help students achieve better learning outcomes. And so there's a variety of these things that I'm going to show you here on my Edge device. Again, I'm going to show this on my Windows 10s machine here, because all of it works on there, just like it would on any of the other machines. But immediately I open up here. I didn't show an Intune for Education. You can push a start page in Edge in Intune for Education. One of the biggest questions we get is, I don't want my kids seeing, pick your choice of what's on the news page there. You can specify that in Edge, and it gets pushed out to groups or specific users, and that'll show up here as well. But kind of the magic in the better learning outcomes things is there was some pretty cool stuff that came in the last update, which was set aside your tabs. And for teachers or other users, the nice thing is they could plan their day and set off a set of tabs here that was ready for them as they moved forward, and they'd just come up here. But there's some cool stuff that's come into Edge, utilizing a variety of stuff from online, things from learning tools that we may see in other applications, but also for some cool stuff like EPUB books. So this is an EPUB book, it's White Fang, that I purchased from the Windows Store. So I purchased this as a user myself. Free books are available to be purchased through schools this way. As we move forward, there's going to be a much better book story in the store that is integrated with Microsoft Store for Education to take care of this functionality. But this is one that I purchased from the store. And the cool thing here, has anybody seen learning tools in general? OneNote, Word? Okay, so a few people. The cool thing here is that functionality is now coming across ebooks, PDFs, general web content in Microsoft Edge. So if we can access the web, that's a great story with Edge. But if we can use it to help students learn better, or anybody to learn better, It's this idea of not learning to read, but reading to learn. And if we can get users over that hump of learning to read, which is the fluency and the comprehension piece, then we move them forward much faster. And so as you'll see, I right-clicked on here, but there's some interesting stuff that's in this ebook content. This is a book, again, I purchased from the Windows Store. But I can do spacing, so I can make the spacing bigger on here. I can do text size to make the text size bigger here. I can change fonts to go through here. Focus font was a cool one that has we created that's been shown to help different types of learners to read better. And then finally, right, if we need some different things here, we can change the background if there's students that need high contrast here as well. I'm going to switch the page here because the title of this one didn't come out very good when we did a read aloud before. But the idea here is that not just can we do those things, but we've brought that read aloud functionality. So this is going to start reading wherever I've placed it on here on these ebooks.
Henry, he said. Oh, Henry. Henry groaned as he passed.
And so we have a variety of
Sleep
different
to
things here,
and demanded,
different voices
"What's
and
wrong
things
now?"
for students as well.
Nothing, came the answer.
Learning
Only
tools in
there's 7 of
OneNote
them again.
had a teacher who showed that the learning that this can do, right, that read aloud, seeing it, hearing it, spaced, sincerely helps the learning process. She had a learning reader. I don't know what the numbers were, but they were pretty incredible. A student that they didn't think would make much performance gain over the year, make great performance. And so now we have that in this EPUB that we've purchased, that may have been purchased from the store. But it also works in general on the internet. So this is, we may have to refresh here, we will. This is an EPUB. This Gutenberg.org is a free ebook publisher. They've got thousands of books on here that you can download and read ebooks. And so if we can't purchase it from the store, we can get this from this same location. And this is an EPUB slowly loading on the internet. And this is now reading across the internet, same type of format as it loads in here. And you'll notice that the same things are available there. And now, finally, as we go through here, we'll pull up a PDF here. IRS form, none of our favorite things here. I couldn't find a better PDF to do this to. We all go through this pain each year here. But we have the same capability here as well. So if you look in any PDF, there's some pretty cool stuff. This one is the read aloud functionality that's here. I don't know anybody who would really want to possibly read aloud
Form W4,
IRS PDF
2017.
form.
Purpose. Complete Form
But we
W4
could do it
so
here.
that your employer
And so there's
can
some cool
withhold the
stuff
correct
that's come
federal
through
income tax from your pay.
to help
Consider
PDF. You could imagine that's a PDF book of White Fang as well, and it would do the same types of things. One other thing, this is a non-necessarily school type thing, but if you look at if you look in here, this is a PDF opened in Edge, so form fills there now. There's some Edge is rounding out some traditional PDF things so that you can do those more traditional things you would think of in a PDF on this device as well. And then finally, the last thing, some of the inking capabilities. Let me close this really quickly. Up in the upper right here is this ink button. This is similar to writing on the web here, but if you click on that now, you can do writing and inking and a whole bunch of things across the whole PDF. If you remember earlier, it was just a snapshot. It took a snapshot, and then you did a snapshot of that. In schools, this is particularly cool because if your book is a PDF, it's a PDF book, students can just notate directly in those. They can write, they can underline, just like they would in a traditional textbook. It works on EPUB too. It pops up notes, and then they can write within the notes and a whole bunch of other things. So while this is just the IRS form and it's showing some of the form fill stuff, if this were a PDF book, a student could go through it, a textbook, anything like that, and they'd have the that power of the inking capability directly on that, and then they'd just save that whole document as well. So there's some nice applications, some nice cool things that like PDF and Edge are working that maybe they didn't think specifically for Edu, but it works really well in an Edu capability here as well. And then finally, if we take that Edge piece, that learning tools piece, and now we look at just the broad web. We showed PDF, we showed ebooks from the web, we showed ebooks from the store. Any web page has that same functionality now. So if there's any web page that we want to go on, we've started reading, White Fang. Sometimes it's kind of hard here to get the read aloud in the right place.
Wiki loves manga.
And so we just have to move
Fang is a novel by
the
American
cursor to
author
get
Jack
there.
London.
But we may have a student who's struggling reading White Fang and needs to get some background knowledge. Now on the web, they could go to Wikipedia or some other location, and they could use that same functionality, which is that read aloud, to help them gain that background knowledge. So that now when they read White Fang and they're wondering about why it was such a vicious time or anything like that, they could get the background knowledge. And if they needed it to read aloud, they could. And then they could go back and they could use that same thing in the EPUB or the PDF. So the idea here is that Edge is going to continue to bring in that reading functionality that's in learning tools to help it be not just a web location, not just a place to go see things on the web, but to be a browser that's really built for learning to help with that whole aspect of it too. So anything that you would want to use learning tools on a Windows device, if it's Office products or non-Office products, the goal is to start allowing that with that capability coming in Edge. So just a couple other things that were newer here. Story Remix. Story Remix is one that has slowly went into Windows Insider's Preview. If you were an Insider Preview in August, you may have had it on your device, and then whoop, it went away. That was a couple decisions. One was the Insider Preview team, and that was also the Story Remix team starting to get the app to start pushing out to devices via the Windows stores and update. So what Story Remix is right now it's just the basics of a video creation app. And you may have seen some of this on the store, or on the blog post that Terry Myerson has done, or things about Fall Creators Update. It has some really cool things it'll be capable of, integrating 3D content, a whole bunch of other things there. But that goal right out of the bat is just to start letting students create videos with images and do a variety of video editing pieces here. Now, if you're on Creators Update or Fall Creators Update coming out, that's what Story Remix will work on. If you have machines that are running Creators Update now, they should have started updating as of September 1st and receiving this as an update. It won't say Story Remix. Let me switch over to this machine. It will be part of the Photos app. And so a little confusing right now from just from that perspective. Let me pull up the Photos app. Is that the Photos app will now have that creation spot in between folders and collections. And what that creation spot is Story Remix. And so what that'll do is, as it pops in there, is it'll allow these remixes or these video stories to be created. It'll get it'll get more efficient over time, but it also makes suggestions of things. We did a family trip. My three boys, they're 10, 13, 17, and my wife went over to Europe this summer. And so in Budapest, it got these pictures here. And so what it did was it created a kind of a general, what's called a remix here. And so you'll see it kind of in the right hand of the screen there. But it simply puts some music in. You can pick different music. And we'll pause it there, but you can go through and you can pick different things, themes, different music that would go along with it, right? And it picks some of these different things. Those aren't my pictures there. Those are just cool Windows pictures that they've done. You can go through and pick a variety of music. You can go through and add your own music. There are ways to do inking as part of it, and inking follows the things that go on there. You can integrate 3D images from Remix 3D. A whole variety of things. If you've seen any of those, they have a Tyrannosaurus Rex 3D image that's been pulled in and is chasing. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's pretty cool associated with that. There's a 3D view associated where you can pop some of this 3D stuff and look through your camera. So there's really a whole bunch of stuff that's coming there. The Story Remix team is posting a whole bunch of curriculum that shows in easy steps some ideas of how this could be used in the classroom. So the easiest baseline piece is that we know that there were some inbox video things that we provided as part of Windows in the past. Those have gone away. Licensing has gone out of time. This is coming in, and we'll start providing some of those that basic functionality that those video apps did in the past. And it will get richer over time as we get more feedback and more functionality and capabilities come in through that. But again, it starts updating on Creators Update devices Fall Creators Update will have this inbox. So Fall Creators Update, when they come out, we'll just have that directly in the box as well. And so I just wanted to say one thing on the inking piece here. We showed it on the web content, the Edge, those capabilities coming through. But there's a lot of other great apps that take advantage of inking in the classroom. The big goal of the inking team is to continue to make it reasonable to make schools want to be able to purchase and use these devices. Number one thing that we hear from not number one, but a top thing we hear from some schools that have bought an inking device is that a lot of times they'll take the pen up because they're worried about the pen going away. Because right now they can use it in OneNote or a couple other locations, but they want it to be used more broadly across the curriculum. And so I'll show one very quick piece here from an inking perspective. One really cool app. This has kind of been a de facto app from really the Windows 8 timeframe. Fluid Math came out around there, but we'll show a quick example here. A line equation. And so this is the example that pops up there. You can pull these up. I don't know if anybody's used a calculator app before. We probably all had to through college or before, but my 8th grader and my junior are using calculators or graphing calculators, and they're pretty hard. And if you think at the younger age, they don't use those yet. But what Fluid Math does, it allows teachers or students to really see stuff and work with it in real time. And so what you'll see here is this is a homework assignment that the teacher put in here. And then they graphed that equation of the line, y equals mx plus b. And they simply did that. This is the example that has it up there. But the simple way they did that was they kind of drew this line through here, through the equation, and it graphed it. And I could go through there and I could modify the variables mx or b, and the line would change. And so this is that better learning outcome piece thing, again, kind of like learning tools. Students can see a graph changing over time when they change the variables. One of the hardest things to grasp as a young learner is, like, y equals mx plus b. What if I change m or x or b? What's going to happen? If I can visually see what's happening as we change these variables, it really changes that learning path, and especially in the younger grades. So if you take this and it's presented up on a whiteboard through something like wireless display or just like we're doing here, and the teacher is working on it, it's really a great way to really see what's happening in these. And it does a lot of complex applications. So there's really some cool stuff there on the inking side of the equation, other than just some of the Office products through Fluid Math and through a bunch of other ones that are out there as well. I'm going to say one last thing, and then we're close to the end, so I will pause and take some questions as we're getting close. The last thing, and this is, we kind of put it at the end, but I'm not presenting wirelessly right now, but if you take a scenario where a teacher has a Windows device, they have Fluid Math and inking on there, that Fluid Math example like we just showed, and then you kind of pair it with this wireless display capabilities. These are screen beams. This is kind of an edgy one, so it's a more powerful one, and this is just one that plugs into the back of an HDMI port on a device. This allows you to project wirelessly from a Windows 10 device. So your teacher can be roaming around the room doing that Fluid Math from anywhere, helping students, and it's displaying up on the board wirelessly through that technology. So it allows them to kind of untether and move around. That's just kind of a cool one. That was a Windows 8.1.2 that we stopped talking about for a while, but you've got some good devices. The technology continues to get better, the reliability, the connection pieces, and the stuff that can be done back and forth bidirectional is pretty cool as well. So I'm going to, there's a couple other things in here. If you do download the presentation, I have links to some other areas there as well. Of course, with any of the sessions, please evaluate. Come see us at the booth as well. We want to hear feedback. I'll clean up and we'll do some questions. I'll hang around for questions afterward. But that's pretty much the end of my presentation. Certainly, thank you guys for coming to join this, and hope you could take just a little something away.